I'm here to talk to you today about how much to charge for forensic work. So I'm going to break this down into two discrete categories because I've seen a lot of confusion around this. So the first category is if you do primarily clinical work. If you do primarily clinical work, you would be coming into the forensic realm as a fact witness. So you might come in to testify about diagnosis, prognosis, or course of treatment. It's okay in that circumstance to have a forensic rate that's higher than your clinical rate, as long as that difference is in your intake paperwork or disclosures. What's not okay is to set your fee at something like double your clinical rate with the primary goal of deterring being brought into legal proceedings. That's an inappropriate use of our fees. The point of fees is to compensate you for your time and your expertise. So there is increased risk in the legal arena, that's true. And forensic experts do generally command higher rates because of that increased risk and the specialization that's required. But we don't use fees defensively like that. It's against our ethics code as mental health practitioners. And so I recommend that you set your fee higher for forensic work than you do with clinical work, but not too much higher. And then you can also add in your disclosures that because you do not routinely do forensic work, there may be extra work associated with an appearance, so extra consultation or research that's required on your part that would be billed at the hourly rate that you stated. So that way you're fairly paid for your time, but you're not unnecessarily gouging people or ensuring that only the people with access to economic resources can have justice. So the second category I want to talk to you about is your more typical expert witness. And before anything else, I want to add the caveat here that fees can vary tremendously based on region as well as the type of forensic work that we're talking about. So I made more hourly at a private practice in California as a postdoc than I do now as an independently licensed expert in the Midwest. And those differences bear out in therapy too. So, for example, in private practice in California, many clinicians you can easily start at $200 an hour or higher there. And the forensic rates then are up over and above that. It's not unusual to see $350 or possibly higher in California. But here in the Midwest, the therapy rates from private practice can range more like $150 to $200, even for seasoned experts. And obviously there's outliers there, lower and higher. But that's the general range that I'm familiar with. And so forensic work takes its reference from that. Not to mention the fact that here in my state, a number of the forensic evaluations are also capped by state rates. So state rates that dictate for this kind of evaluation, you can get onto the court's roster, and then you're accepting that you're going to do this work at X number per hour, which is considerably lower than what would be considered the going rate in the private sector. And so again, that's where differences in the type of evaluation can vary tremendously, because if you're doing competency evaluations here, which have a state rate, you're likely going to command a lower rate than if you're doing family court evaluations, which are almost exclusively private and out of pocket fees there. So for family court work, you may even start to see flat rate fees in the $3,000 to $5,000 per range. And again, there's outliers. You can get them for much lower. You probably wouldn't see too much higher than that, but I'm sure it's possible. In addition to the fact that there's just an expectation of a higher hourly rate. So another question is whether you should charge differently for different kinds of tasks. There's no specific ethical guideline about this that I'm aware of, at least, but I think that most of us who do forensic work feel that if you're a forensic expert, your rate is already higher than in the clinical realm to represent the risks and challenges of this specialty, which means that we should be charging equally for all of the time, for all of the tasks, because they're all important. They're all a part of the job. So going to court to defend our opinions is an inherent part of this job if you're going to be a forensic expert. And so charging differently for your time in court can make it look like time in court is more important than the time you spent interviewing your examinee or the time you spent writing your report. And I think most of us would say that's not actually true, that all the tasks are equally important. I think the other piece that's probably more important and a little more subtle is that charging differently for testimony can really open you up to some bias. So it'd be hard to say whether you're offering that opinion because you know that you'll land yourself in court and command a higher fee. Even if that's just optics, it's really not worth the risk of it looking that way or appearing that way. So in conclusion here, I think some would probably say that really I shouldn't be talking openly about my own personal fee situation, but I really feel that we do a disservice to each other and to our clients and to this field by not disclosing information about money. I know there's all sorts of regulations about that depending on who pays you, and some people may not have any other choice, but I do. And this information is open to anybody who clicks onto my website and can see my fee structure, because I think that kind of transparency is critically important for people to know what they're getting. A huge part of what they're getting is what it's going to cost. So my rate here in the Midwest is $220 an hour. I charge equally for all my time, from like interviewing to testimony, whether I'm waiting outside of a courtroom, whether I'm traveling to a courtroom, it's all the same rate. When I do private cases, I do have in my disclosures that I will charge a half day or a full day fee depending on how it's scheduled. And if I don't get cancellation within 48 hours notice, I'll go ahead and assess that fee. Now, the reason for that is because, and again, this is listed in my engagement letter, but the reason for that is because I'm not able to schedule anything else. Now, I know some people do widen that window. For example, I know of some folks who use like a 5 business day window, that if they don't have cancellation by that time, and that makes sense with certain kinds of specialties where there's really stable scheduling, or in certain jurisdictions where things don't tend to get rescheduled as often. But where I am, that would be pretty prohibitive. It's pretty common for dates to fluctuate, and so going out more than 48 hours would be an outlier here where I am, I think. So that's why I've said it the way I've said it. But I'm not able to do that for the state or county funded evaluations that I take. So if I'm sitting outside of a hearing at 12:45 that's scheduled for an appearance at 1, and I'm told at 12:45, actually we're not going on, we've been canceled, I can't recoup for that time other than the time it took me to get there and the time that I was sitting there. And so I think the sort of comparison here is very similar to clinical work when you're doing, like, trying to decide if you're going to take private pay cases, which may be harder to get, but they are more lucrative and they come with less restrictions, versus if you're going to be like an insurance-based clinician where there's a steadier stream of referrals, you're more likely to get work, but there's going to be different rules. You're probably not going to be able to be compensated for no-shows. The overall compensation rate's going to be lower, and a lot of people will opt for kind of a balance between both. So that should be it for covering rates. Let me know with a comment or an email if there's something that I missed, something you liked, something you disagree with. Let me know your thoughts. This is Sebastian Ryland with Streamline Forensics.